You can gain muscle whilst cutting. You can certainly maintain muscle whilst cutting. In fact, if you don't maintain muscle whilst cutting and you're not like 5% body fat or something ridiculous, you're doing something seriously wrong. In this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what I'm talking about here, how to do it. Because there's this, I can't talk today already, massive misconception amongst guys here on watching my YouTube videos, also on Instagram, I think in the world in general, that you need to be in a calorie surplus at all times in order to gain muscle. And being in a calorie surplus helps, but it's hardly the be all and end all. What's actually more important is the quality of the training. And also sleep's a huge one. Cortisol's another one. And again, I'll get into each factor in a bit more detail in a minute, but the notion that you have to be pigging out all the time to gain muscle is just ridiculous. And I've said before that I think guys like Mike Israel and Eric Helms, they're very, very good. And they're obviously experts, and they are really, really good, but they've done a couple of videos that have gone viral. And it's like the pyramid of priorities, and whilst it is kind of, there is some truth to it, like calories is the base in a sense, it's hardly the bottom line. Pigging out in order to gain muscle is ridiculous. It's not something I've ever needed to do, and I guarantee it's the same with you as well. Because there's guys who are pigging out or eating a calorie surplus, and they haven't stuck to a training program for more than 2 months in their entire lives, because they get a little bit of a sniffle or a little bit of a cold, or the kid gets sick, or something happens at work, or they have a little minor injury. If you break your leg, that's different, but a minor injury, and then something small goes wrong and that ruins their entire plan. I've never had this ever. The only time I've taken significant time off the gym was when I had a football injury when I was 16, and I snapped both ligaments in my ankle and I couldn't walk for a week, so of course I can't go to the gym. But outside of that, I've never taken time off. Even on holiday, I'll still do bodyweight stuff. So most guys are there thinking they need to pig out, but they can't even do the basics, which is actually stick to a program and stick to it hard, like with some real intensity. That's actually the bottom of the pyramid in reality. Life isn't a science study. Life isn't some laboratory experiment. In real life, and I've done a lot of coaching now, testosterone coaching for 5 years, health and fitness coaching for coming up to 10 years. And in the real world, the things that actually stop you from gaining muscle are not that you're not eating enough food. The fact that someone's 20% body fat is a huge sign that lack of food isn't the problem. There's also a ton of guys who are skinny fat. And yes, there's a narrow neck, small arms, relatively narrow waistline, narrow shoulders. They're not fat to look at, especially when there's clothes on them. But again, even with these guys, they've already got a decent amount of extra energy, let's call it, tied to their waistline, their chest area. You can see it in their face as well, like chubby cheeks. More calories is not the answer. More training is the answer. More sleep, taking things more seriously. So let's get into the different factors. I've already hinted at training. So with this is within the context of a calorie deficit. I'm assuming you're not already super shredded, otherwise you wouldn't be asking this question. And I'm assuming, we're talking about gaining muscle or maintaining muscle in a calorie deficit. This is the holy grail, guys. Like this is huge. If you can do this, you're going to have a really good physique. And this is a skill as well. The first thing is that the calorie deficit is small or relatively small. So obviously I'm not saying starve yourself. That's not going to help, because that also ramps up the cortisol levels, which are catabolic, makes it harder to sleep. That's never a good idea. So the calorie deficit needs to be small. And then the second thing, and when I say small, I'm talking less than 500 a day. Probably more like 300 a day. And at that point, it's not going to cause problems. You've still got, so for me that means 2,200, 2,300 calories, maybe slightly more. That's plenty of food to gain muscle on. You're hardly starving yourself. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is that the training is intense and the training is there. Like, this is a huge assumption guys like Mike Israel are making. It's a massive assumption in the real world. The guys I've spoken to, assuming that the training is even there in the first place, is a massive assumption. So you actually have to stick to the program, and you actually must not skip any days, including leg days, especially leg days. And I don't care, it doesn't matter if your body, your physique doesn't care if your kid is sick or your boss is a, what can I say on YouTube? Is a you know what, CNUT, or I don't know, there's some kind of virus or whatever, or you have a niggling pain in your elbow. Your physique doesn't care. You must be training. And again, a lot of it with injuries is when you feel that little tweak coming on, you either change exercise or you back off a little bit in the moment and then go and sleep well. And you're usually fine 3 days later when you come back to hit the same muscle group. And apply plenty of heat to the area, especially in the winter. There's different things you can and should do. But yeah, you actually have to be in the gym, obviously. You actually have to be training. The intensity is a massive factor. Probably the biggest reason, and please guys, don't underestimate the importance of this. I am currently training in the gym in Liverpool for about half of my sessions, the other half are at home. And over the years, I used to train at a local gym here in Cheshire, where there's some absolute monsters, but there's also a lot of guys who have just been the same for years, and I turn up 8 years later and they still look the same. And the same doesn't mean anything, like very average, I mean. And it's the same in the gym in Liverpool. These guys aren't making any progress. And all of it is for the same reason. Is that their training is not inspiring or stimulating progress. The incentive for the body to progress in the first place just isn't there, so the body doesn't progress. And that means you're either doing the same routine over and over again with no progressive overload week on week, or, and this is so common with these like young guys in the gym, or you're resting for like 5 minutes in between sets and you're just scrolling on your phone, like your mind's just somewhere else. You're not present, you're not focused, you're not putting any real effort into things. And then you're in the gym for 2 hours and you've not even forced any change. So it's just a waste of time. It's crazy. Whereas I'm there doing drop sets and rest pause sets. So even if I'm not doing enough to force change, at least I'm getting some time effective workload in there. I'm not wasting 2 hours of my life. It's more like 40 minutes. So training, if anything, I would say is the foundation of any pyramid. Not how much food you're eating. Again, if you're starving yourself, then it's a problem with these roads. Never get any peace. If you're starving yourself, then yes, then it becomes the foundation of the pyramid. But I don't think anyone watching this video is starving themselves, because you know instinctively that that's going to cause muscle loss. And also, it's very hard to starve yourself in a world where calories are everywhere, at the tip of a finger, a tap of a screen or whatever. It's harder and harder to do that in the modern world. We're not cavemen. We don't have to hunt our food. So yeah, no one's starving themselves. So whatever, training is the foundation. So they're two huge factors. A third big factor beyond focusing on calories all the time is protein, the quantity and the quality. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. There's quite a lot of Indian guys out there who will eat, 100, they hear 150 grams of protein and they'll do their best to try and get like 130 or 120. And you actually look at what they're eating and it's like, there's a few eggs in there with a lot of them. And then the rest of it is like lentils and tofu and chickpeas and stuff. And the stomach's just like out there because of the food they're eating, and the quality of the proteins is just not great. Like there's a humongous difference between a guy who's lean bulking, let's say, an Indian guy who's lean bulking on lentils and chickpeas, and then a Western guy, or any guy, doesn't really matter, who's in a small calorie deficit and he's getting 170 grams of protein from various types of meat and fish and seafood, maybe some whey protein, eggs. There's a huge difference. Who do you think is going to be more anabolic? The guy who's eating tofu and lentils in a small surplus, or the guy that's having like very, very anabolic, nutrient-dense, high-protein foods in a small deficit? I can tell you it's the latter. It's the second guy. And this Indian versus whoever example I've just mentioned is another example of where guys like Mike Israel and Eric Helms are making some huge assumptions in their videos. And again, real life is not a science experiment. There's too many other factors at play, there's too many assumptions that go into these studies. So I'm just... B3 lol, what a weird reg play. I'm just telling you exactly what works in the real world and the things that I've seen that are causing guys like yourselves to fail with this. So the third factor there is the protein, the quantity and also the quality, both very important. A fourth one, and I'm going to tie this together because this is just huge, but there's different variables, there's different areas within this topic, this macro topic, and it's recovery. So you've got things like sleep, you've got cortisol, and then you've got kind of like tertiary factors, other factors that can improve blood flow, bring down other types of stress hormones, and they all kind of play off each other at the same time. Sleep is probably the most foundational one of these three recovery areas. I promise you, I will actually go ahead and say this, I promise you, you can have all the food in the world, even all the training in the world, you could even be on steroids. You're not going to make gains if you're only sleeping 3 hours a night. That's how extreme I would say this is. Now that doesn't mean that like sleep 8 or 9 hours a night and you're going to turn into Ronnie Coleman. That's not true. But sleep deprivation, which is becoming more and more common as people get more and more stressed out and have mental health problems and insomnia and stuff like that, and financial stress, sleep deprivation will kill your physique faster than anything else. It's almost like being injured and unable to train. When taken far enough, sleep deprivation is like having a brain injury. Your body just doesn't recover properly. Sleep is huge. So obviously, yeah, 8 to 9 hours is the ideal. But seven is usually good, especially if the REM sleep is there, the depth. In terms of how to do that, I mean, it's the same kind of stuff. It all ties in with cortisol in general. The timing of the cortisol, which is really important. You can't have high cortisol in the evenings. but also the amount. If it gets really high in the mornings, and then your overall lifestyle just isn't quite there, it's not conducive to lowering the cortisol, it tends to just be too high all the time. And then if you're not getting enough sleep, that exacerbates it. And it's not just cortisol, it's all the stress hormones that manifest themselves in physical pain, and they just lead to all sorts of health problems. We don't fully understand stress, especially in the traditional sense. It's very, very hard to measure, it's hard to quantify, so we struggle to understand it, but it doesn't mean it's not real. But in terms of, bringing cortisol down, in terms of improving sleep, it's getting natural light in the morning, like I am doing. It's an absence of light in the evening, especially blue light. It's deep breathing, meditation can be useful. It's especially deep breathing in the evening, because you can be pretty stressed out in the morning. If you're calm by the evening, you're probably going to sleep well. Fiction book, that tends to just switch off the logical, analytical mind, allows the brain to relax properly. What else for sleep? A lot of it's to do with light, and having some carbs in the evening helps as well. I say carbs, fruit and potatoes, if you're cutting, which is what this topic is. Fruit and potatoes are the main ones. You could have rice if you've got some calories left over, but they're a bit more nutritionally sparse in comparison. Less fiber as well. And then cortisol. That's a huge one if your cortisol levels are high. So again, we can equate calories, we can equate protein intake, we can equate training between two guys. Two guys are doing the exact same thing, except one guy gets all his calories in one meal. And I know there are certain influencers out there who promote this, and this is fine if you do it occasionally for health reasons. But if you're a natural, right, so you're not on steroids, you're not going to gain as much muscle getting all your calories in one meal, OMAD, as opposed to getting them in 3 or 4 meals, because you've got 3 or 4 different protein servings, which in itself is more anabolic than just one, because your body's going to get more effective at using it. But a huge one here is the cortisol difference. A guy doing OMAD, his cortisol level is going to be like way higher in comparison. Way higher over a way more prolonged period of time. Cortisol is not anabolic. It's catabolic by nature, which is fine under certain circumstances, but we're talking about gaining muscle in a calorie deficit here. You're already in a potentially catabolic situation. You don't want to make it worse by doing something like OMAD and just having no calories, or vitamins and minerals coming in for 22 hours or whatever, 23 and a half hours, whatever it would be. That's not smart. If you want to gain muscle in a calorie deficit, not only should the deficit be small and the training be intense and the protein be high and high quality, the cortisol levels need to be as low as possible, which starts with not fasting for long periods of time. It also means not doing zero carb. Carbs are going to lower cortisol far more effectively than protein or fats. And I say carbs, I mean clean carbs, of course. And also, you've got a few other things like magnesium. Magnesium bisglycinate has a lot of health benefits, and it's got a lot to do with your cortisol as well, and stress hormones in general. And sleep. There's a lot of, I don't want to call it conditions, there's a lot of problematic things you can have in your body that are solved or helped by magnesium bisglycinate. L-threonate's more for like focus and things like that. Bisglycinate is going to help you sleep more. It's going to help with the cortisol levels. This is so boggy, I'm not getting anywhere here. And it'll help with yeah, insomnia, it'll help with mental health issues. A lot of mental health issues are really just the dude is stressed out as hell and his testosterone's taken a hit and he's not getting enough serotonin. Like, there's a bunch of stuff going wrong at the same time, but a lot of it's stress related with mental health. So magnesium will help with that as well. If you want to take this to the next level, you would, I mean, it depends how much caffeine you have, it depends how lean you are, it depends how much sleep you're already getting, depends on the size of the calorie. There's loads of factors that go into this, so I can't just give you numerical suggestions, although I would do for consulting and coaching. The general rule though is the 2 times of the day where you want to have magnesium bisglycinate: before bed, kind of an obvious one because of the sleep, and also post-workout, because there will be a cortisol spike post-workout. If you take the magnesium, then you just get the testosterone spike and you barely get the cortisol spike, so it makes training even more anabolic. So after those 20 rep squats to failure, you know what to do. Have some protein obviously, but some carbs, clean carbs, and some magnesium bisglycinate as well. So that's cortisol. And then the third part of the recovery trifecta, let's call it, is kind of other factors, tertiary factors, things like meditation, deep breathing, cold plunges. It depends how often you do them and how much you do them. If you're doing them every day, I would argue that's going to make your cortisol worse. If you do them a couple of times a week and you do them in the mornings, because I can imagine there's some guys watching this who are just mental ex-army types who will train 6 days a week, and then they'll hear that cold ice baths have benefits, and they'll be doing ice baths 24 times a week or something. It's like, it's too much for your body to handle. Especially if you're doing it in the evening, it might make you sleep worse because of the cortisol and the adrenaline in the immediate short term that it elicits. If you do it in the morning a couple of times a week, it will make your body more effective at controlling cortisol on a chronic basis, especially if you follow it with carbs and magnesium. Clean carbs. No, I'm not saying eat loads of Haribo. I'm saying fruit, the clean stuff. So that, yeah, ice baths, if you use them in moderation. Sauna, post-workout sauna. Things like sex and just interacting with attractive members of the opposite sex, or same sex if you're so inclined. I don't want someone attacking me in the comments, but that kind of thing could be huge. Like, I know in the self-improvement space, especially for men, well, for both genders, there's all this, sack off the other, gender and focus on yourself. But I'm focusing here on cortisol and gaining muscle in a calorie deficit, and oxytocin and the physical side of things will absolutely reduce your cortisol levels. It'll help you recover. No one's saying get addicted to a particular person. No one's saying be a weirdo, but the physical side of things will help with your cortisol levels. So they're the big four, really. So as a bit of a recap, is a small calorie deficit. Oh, there might be 5 factors, I can't remember. Small deficit, don't starve yourself, obviously. The training, right? You can't be taking a month off from the gym because some small thing goes wrong in your life and then expect to gain muscle in a calorie deficit. You're just going to lose muscle. Third factor was protein. The quantity and the quality. So think of the Westerner versus the Indian or the vegan guy. And then you get and then you get these vegan accounts on Instagram. This is hilarious, where they start linking, they get really angry at some of my videos, and I'm not a carnivore guy, I eat both meat and veg, and they'll start tagging in all these vegan accounts, and it's like, you click on their account, like the dude supposedly eats tofu and is like twice the size of me, like obviously the guy's on steroids, and they think that proves their point, and it's like, yes, if you inject loads of tren and growth hormone and stuff, like, yeah, obviously that changes the game entirely. That does not prove that veganism is anabolic. Anabolics are anabolic. But yeah, that's the protein thing. Fourth factor was recovery, and then there's different types of recovery. Sleep, cortisol, and then like tertiary factors. If you have all four of those on point, small deficit, tons of protein, very intense training, and then you control for cortisol, sleep like a lion, as I've said over the years, get your magnesium in, quality carbs, you will gain muscle in a deficit. I've done it many times. Again, I'm assuming you're not 8% body fat watching this, because if you are, that's different. You won't be able to do it then. I've done it at 12-13%. You can gain muscle at 12-13 in a deficit. If you're 17, 18, 20, 22%, yes, you can gain quite a lot of muscle in a deficit. Like, what's wrong with you? Come on, be a bit more ambitious. And these limiting beliefs, like 22% body fat, you can't gain muscle in deficit. Something's really wrong there. You can do it. Now, my most recent video was about building a beach body, or getting a beach body in 3 months, which is when the summer really starts to become upon us. Check that video out, it's linked here. I give you the truth. It's not about ab training. There's more important things to look at, stuff that's always helped me over the years. So check that video out, I think you'll find it useful.